Good morning. My name is Mike Reck. I'm an attorney with Jeff Anderson and Associates. We are a law firm that advocates on behalf of survivors of sexual abuse throughout the country and here in the Diocese of San Bernardino. We're here today announcing the release of the Anderson Report on clerical sexual abuse in the Diocese of San Bernardino. We're doing this today because the information contained in this report about accused sexual offenders is of a vital and burning public need. We're doing this because disclosing this information makes children safer, and it lets those survivors who are still suffering in silence, thinking they may be alone, know that they are not alone. They did nothing wrong, and this was not their fault. This information is information that could have and should have been shared by church officials long ago. We're doing this because the Diocese of San Bernardino did not, and the Bishop of San Bernardino did not. Now, the Diocese of San Bernardino has released information on some of the accused offenders. They've put out a list. That list is here. It's in the package that we gave you. That list includes 35 offenders. The Anderson list includes 84 offenders. The reason we were compelled to put this information out there is because it was a vital necessity, and it was left out by the diocese. And when the diocese put out its list of 35, it failed to account for the fact that this diocese was only created in 1978. So offenders who were abusing children prior to 1978 were included in the Diocese of San Diego. Those offenders were not included on the San Diego list. They simply chose to make a determination of 1978 forward, and they left the Diocese of San Diego to make its own decisions on who and how and when to release that information. We compiled an additional 32 names from the Diocese of San Diego records and added those to the list to create the Anderson Report. We also compiled additional known alleged offenders from various public sources throughout the country and throughout the world, from media accounts, from bishop accountability, from public court filings, and that accounts for the 84 individuals in the Anderson Report. Each of those individuals are photographed, if their photos were available, and their complete assignment histories are in the Anderson Report year by year. In addition to just disclosing the identities, one of the burning questions that always arises in the world of child protection is, where are these individuals today? Are they still a danger to children? Are they still priests? Are they disclosed? Are they in jail? One of the attorneys who helps us work on these cases here in San Bernardino and throughout the country, Jennifer Stein, come up for a second, please. Jennifer, you worked on compiling this report and on compiling the assignment histories of these known accused offenders.
That's correct.
And how many of these offenders are still priests today?
So of the 84 perpetrators, publicly accused perpetrators contained within the Anderson Report, 53 of them we believe to be deceased based on the publicly available information that we have found. That leaves a remaining 31 publicly accused priests that may be alive may be deceased, may or may not still be in ministry. You'll note that the list issued by the Diocese of San Bernardino notes for some of the accused priests that they have been removed from ministry or permanently banned from ministry within the diocese. That, however, fails to account for whether they have been permanently removed from ministry in other dioceses across the country or throughout the world.
So do we know if any of these unknown offenders are under any type of supervision, be it from church officials or from law enforcement?
So for the vast majority, we don't know. That information is held by church officials, and they are the ones with that information and are the ones who we call upon to disclose that information.
Thank you. And we are making that call upon church officials today on behalf of the Anderson firm, on behalf of the survivors, and on behalf of the public. We challenge Bishop Barnes to do better and to release that information. We challenge all bishops throughout this country and throughout the world to make child protection the priority and to no longer keep this information secret, to no longer protect reputation and image over child safety. One of the brave survivors of clergy sexual abuse is here with us today. His name is Tom Emens. Tom is a survivor of clergy sex abuse. He's also the plaintiff in a lawsuit that seeks no money, a lawsuit that seeks no economic damages, a lawsuit that seeks solely the disclosure and the disgorgement of the information kept secret in church archives and church files throughout California. The type of information that the Anderson report attempts to compile based on public information. His lawsuit seeks additional information still held under lock and key in church archives here in San Bernardino and in archives throughout the state. Tom? What motivated you to bring this lawsuit? Why is this important to you? And why is there no money that you're seeking?
So the best answer I could give on that would be that when I started my journey, this is 3 years ago. Actually, if we were looking back in time to when my assault took place, this is 40 years ago, but I didn't actually come out with my story in a public sense until 2016. And at that time, I had a lot of questions. And when I started asking questions, I wasn't getting answers. I was getting, misdirected in a lot of ways between the 3 dioceses that I had to deal with, because the priest that assaulted me came from Chicago and retired in California. And I didn't even know this, but Orange County was split off from LA County as a diocese. So for me, it was just truth. I was looking for the answers, and I didn't have any answers. So once I realized that the priest that assaulted me was retired, then I started asking questions like, well, was he even allowed to practice in the parish? And to this day, I don't even have an answer to that question. So go back a couple months, October 2nd, the day we filed the lawsuit, I remember the conversation clearly. To me, this lawsuit is really about truth. It's about protection. It's about disclosure. It's about protecting people. I was not protected. So the very least I could do is protect everybody from this moment on. The other reason is very personal. I'm a survivor of the same priest that assaulted me. And when I realized what he was going through, I realized, okay, this is what I have to do. And this is the vehicle that I'm going to hop on and chase after the truth from this point on. So,
When you met the other survivor who you had not known of before undertaking this movement, how was that? Tell me how that was responded to. How did you feel when you found out that you're not alone, that there were other survivors who were also in silence? Was that a healing moment? Was it galvanizing? Did it make you angry? What did you ask for from the church in your mind?
I wanted him to get help first and foremost. I think I reached out to him, and for me it was a validating moment for sure. I think for any victim who's tuning in today and sees these names and sees this report, it's a validating moment. It's a healing moment. I've had many healing moments, and that is what has gravitated me to this movement: is finding healing, finding the truth. That's in the story right there.
Tom Emens, thank you for doing what you're doing. Now, this is a problem that, as we see, is not isolated to San Bernardino, but there are factors in this particular diocese here in San Bernardino that have exacerbated the problem and have made these communities particularly vulnerable to sexually offending priests. If we look at the Diocese of San Bernardino, it was created relatively recently. It came into existence in 1978 when it was carved out of what was then the Diocese of San Bernardino, the Diocese of San Diego. And historically, there has always been a shortage of essentially homegrown diocesan priests, of local diocesan priests from these San Bernardino communities. That shortage leads to an importing of clerics. Clerics who are brought in from religious orders, be they Franciscans, Jesuits, Benedictines, any of the religious orders that operate worldwide, were offered from the bishops in San Bernardino positions to work and staff the San Bernardino facilities. Additionally, extern priests, priests who travel from other dioceses, were welcomed into this diocese right here because of the need and the shortage of local clerics to function in these facilities. That dramatic shortage creates an opening. That creates a dangerous condition where priests have a last chance, where they're needed, and where their dangers were ignored because church officials cared more about staffing the facilities than they did about the histories of these individuals. Now, if we look historically at that shortfall, that shortage of priests, it runs current through today. In December of 2018, church officials released the statistics on the numbers of local diocesan priests versus religious orders and extern priests. 78% of the priests functioning right here in 2018, according to the church, were not local diocesan priests. They're still relying on religious orders, and they're still relying on extern priests from other jurisdictions. Now, we know that that's a potential danger because you have individuals coming in from foreign countries, coming in from religious orders who are not subject to the same oversight that's promulgated here in the United States. But in addition to that being a potential danger, we know that it was an actual danger and harm was inflicted because the bishops have told us that. They've told us this problem existed even prior to the creation of this diocese. In 1950, the Bishop of San Diego, which included San Bernardino, wrote a letter to church officials in Rome where he complained of the Franciscan order using the communities of Beaumont and Banning as a dumping ground for priests with moral problems. A copy of that letter has been made publicly available. It's in your documents. It's in the Anderson report. If we're still operating under the same protocols that were dangerous in 1950, then the same danger exists today, and the vital need for independent oversight and full disclosure burns more importantly today than it does back then. The reality is, if we can't learn from the past, we're doomed to repeat it. And this diocese needs to learn from the past, and they need to do better. The shortage of priests highlights a particularly international element to the Diocese of San Bernardino. Because there are so many priests coming in from foreign jurisdictions and from religious orders, we have, in this microcosm, right here in San Bernardino, an international movement of child sex offenders. In the report, and provided as a visual, is this map. This map shows, as best we could create it, the international movement of accused offenders into and out of the Diocese of San Bernardino. You'll note the highest number on here corresponds with Mexico. We're able to verify that at least 7 accused priests left the Diocese of San Bernardino and entered Mexico. These are priests who worked here in San Bernardino at some of the most vulnerable communities. Communities that were oftentimes primarily Spanish-speaking. Communities that welcomed in these priests, that needed these priests because there were not local priests to do the job. And when those offenders left, those 7 offenders didn't go to jail. They didn't go to lockdown facilities. They went to Mexico. And the reality is we have no idea whether those 7 offenders are in ministry in Mexico, have access to children, or really are even alive, because no one tracked them. They were simply let go into Mexico. With us also today is Manny Vega. Manny Vega is a survivor of child sex abuse by a Catholic priest. He's a veteran, he's a police officer, and he's also a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Vatican. That lawsuit seeks the disclosure and the disgorgement of information held secret in Vatican archives. The Vatican has told the UN that there are thousands of files that they keep under lock and key on sexually abusive priests. Manny's lawsuit seeks to disclose that information. And he's here today for another burning need. His offender, Father Fidencio Silva, is in the Anderson report. And he's in the Anderson report because he worked in San Bernardino after working in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, after abusing children in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, after abusing Manny. Father Silva was exposed to communities here in San Bernardino. Manny, can you come up for a second? Sure. Manny, you came from a very particular community that allowed Father Silva to enter and to access children there. Not just you, but lots of kids.
Sure.
So you have a little bit of a unique perspective on this that I think would benefit all of us if you share. How does an offender like Father Silva infiltrate the communities that you grow up in, and how does he affect the people there?
Sure. So, my name is Manny Vega. I was born and raised in Oxnard, California. I am a child of immigrant parents who came from Mexico, work in the fields. The area where I grew up in Oxnard is called La Colonia. It's a poor Mexican barrio. Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish there, the church, functioned as a sanctuary for all the immigrant families. As far back as I can remember, going to Our Lady of Guadalupe was always a part of family. That's where, instead of being out in the streets around gang members, around the drugs, around the violence, my parents would send us there, my brother and I. And, and it was a time there that my parents had some marital problems, and as they had their marital problems, Father Fidencio Silva had come to Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. My parents were seeking marital advice from Father Silva, so he knew where the family was weak. And at the same time, I was an altar boy. I was a member of a group of altar boys, 60 of us. And so he kind of, through my parents' struggles, saw where the family was weak, where it was in need, and he kind of inserted himself there as my best friend. But the same was happening to all my other friends who were altar boys, who also went to a local Catholic school there. And, those some friends that were being raised by their grandparents or by a single mom. And somehow we all kind of got clustered in this group, and Father Fidencio Silva began to groom us. Now, I didn't understand any of this until later in life when I became a police officer. I worked for the city of Los Angeles, and I retired out of the city of Oxnard as a police officer. I investigated sexual assaults for many years, so I have a very unique perspective on everything that took place to me and to my friends, and moving forward. He groomed us. He led us down a path of believing in him. He deceived our parents, deceived the entire parish. But when I look back, I know that he was not deceiving the fellow priest. Because I remember very clearly how we would spend a night in his room. We would take showers in his room, sometimes by myself, sometimes with other altar boys. But after a while, the priests that were there wouldn't allow us to go upstairs to his bedroom, and then they wouldn't allow us to go past the stairwell going upstairs, and then they wouldn't let us go past the dining hall, and then they wouldn't let us, they would only have us in the reception area, and then eventually they wouldn't even they would open the door at the rectory and say he wasn't there. Okay, so those, when I look back, they knew. They absolutely knew something was wrong. Father Fidencio would sexually abuse me by myself in the church. He would have me get undressed, take photographs of me, have me masturbate while he took pictures of me. He digitally penetrated me in my anus. Okay. He fondled me numerous times in the rectory, in the church. And, he raped me also. When I talked to my other friends who were altar boys, those who want to talk about it, pretty much the same thing happened to us, to them also. And so it just wasn't just a slight touching over the clothing. It wasn't just a caress or something that was wrong. No, this is a full-on rape of a child. I counted the people that are in here. There's 18 of us in here. Us up front, the people running the cameras, the people that are doing the report, there's 18 of us, okay? When we presented our lawsuit against the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, there was 29 of us that came forward. Of the 29, I know that there's at least another 10 that never came forward because of for whatever reason. So that means that everybody in this room would have been touched, somehow physically abused by one man as a child. And we got to put that into perspective as far as the damage that he caused, not only to me, I'm 52 years old and here I am talking about this, but to all my friends, to all our families. It's devastating, simply devastating. He destroyed us, destroyed our faith, not only in God, but also within the Catholic Church. And it brought into question a lot of things, It deeply affects you, Father Fidencio Silva, I was told maybe 2 months ago from another friend of mine who was an altar boy who was physically abused by him, that somebody saw him in Mexico still being a priest. And I quickly have got some contacts in Mexico, and we were looking for it. Because again, I'm seeking the truth. seeking justice. He walked away. He literally walked away. He sexually abused us. He got moved. I believe it shows that he was here in 1999, I believe, or sometime after that. And to me, it's incredible, just the damage that he caused in the city of Oxnard to all of us. And here he ends up in 1999, years later, and from my investigation, my own personal investigation into Father Fidencio, I know that he had other incidents that the Archdiocese of Los Angeles was aware of. So was the Missionaries of the Holy Spirit, who he belongs to the order of, and they're protecting him. But here he ends up in 1999. The community is completely unaware that they have a monster, dealing with children. The family don't know. So, to me, this is what we're all here to get some answers. Mike said that here I am presenting a lawsuit against the Vatican. You're right. This is not only here, not only in the state of California, not only in the United States, this is worldwide. The level of abuse that's occurred to children throughout the world is devastating. We have to put that into some sort of context and understand that a man was physically touching, raping children, working for an organization that knows about it. At one point or another, I'm sure that Patrick could probably talk about it, they're sending them to these treatment homes where they're medically castrating priests and then putting them back into service. That sounds crazy. That sounds like something out of some science fiction movie, but that's what really took place. The Archdiocese, or the Catholic Church at one point was looking at purchasing an island in the Caribbean to move all their pedophile priests. Again, sounds like science fiction, but that's what they're thinking about. There's a grave issue here, and we need to take care of it.
Manny, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Manny Vega strikes an important point, and the point is church officials knew about Father Silva. They didn't just know about Father Silva. Let's talk about what they knew and who knew it. Diocesan officials right here in the Diocese of San Bernardino have maintained and still maintain secret archive files on these offenders. But even more so, this particular diocese housed an aftercare facility run by a religious group called the Servants of the Paraclete. The Servants of the Paraclete are currently run by this man, Father David Fitzgerald. Father Fitzgerald worked in the Diocese of San Bernardino as a religious order priest, imported from elsewhere, assimilated into San Bernardino, working as a priest. He moved up the chain of command until he achieved high-ranking positions. In 2010 and 2011, he was the vicar for clergy and the vicar for priests, high-ranking positions where he undoubtedly had access not just to diocesan files about accused offenders, but he, as a servant of the Paraclete, ran a facility in Cherry Valley that treated and housed offenders who had been treated at church-run facilities. That facility existed. In your documents, in the Anderson report, there are documents created by the Servants of the Paraclete acknowledging the existence of this facility, talking about this facility right here. After 2011, when he worked in the chancery here in San Bernardino, Father Fitzgerald was promoted to be the Servant General. That is the highest ranking official in the organization of the church which treats pedophile priests. He reports directly to Rome. And he worked right here in San Bernardino. Patrick Wall is with us today. Pat Wall is a former Catholic priest. He's an expert on clerical sexual abuse, and he knows more about clerical sexual abuse than just about anyone who's not still a priest. Patrick, what are the servants of the Paraclete?
Well, Pericles essentially were created in 1947. Rome established him, and this Father Gerald Fitzgerald, not to be confused with David, in 1947, they created a religious institute for fallen priests. Literally, the priests who have sexually abused kids, who have had all kinds of serious issues. They created a facility in Emens Springs, New Mexico. That quickly spread to 23 facilities across the world. So when Manny was talking about chemical castration, that was one of the modalities that the servants of the Paracletes experimented with. Literally high doses of Depo-Provera. So they have been working with child molesters in the church since 1947. They literally they have the largest body of data on non-incarcerated sex offenders in the United States.
And Patrick, how do you know that this organization had a facility here in San Bernardino?
Well, one of the reasons we included this little pamphlet right in the middle of the Anderson report is because that's the sales pamphlet that the Paracletes would go around to the various orders and the various dioceses to say, okay, this is the modality of how we do things. We analyze the priests, we give them a 6-month treatment program, we send them through a halfway house, then we start to reinculturate them. And one of the scariest pieces for the Cherry Valley facility, they monitored the priests as they would go out to parishes here in San Bernardino to see if they would reoffend. They literally were using the people of San Bernardino as a testing ground.
What type of information would this man, Father Fitzgerald, have access to in the archives of the Cherry Valley Treatment Facility and the Diocesan Chancery?
Well, as the vicar for clergy, and this is a special position within each diocese, he not only has access to the 489 files, which are mandated of the Code of Canon Law, but he also has access to the most sensitive files. Those are separate from the historical files, so every little complaint that's ever been given notice to the diocese, he literally would be the guy that would answer the phone for any complaint that came in. So no matter how old the case, going back into the 1950s, or how current the case, he is the single most knowledgeable guy regarding childhood sexual abuse in the Diocese of San Bernardino, because he also has access to all the Paraclete files. And they treated over 2,000 priests in just the United States.
Thank you, Patrick. This report, again, is incomplete. It's incomplete because survivors and survivors advocates created the Anderson report. The rest of this information is still held by church officials, and the single most important child protection movement is accountability and transparency. We urge those bishops both here in San Bernardino, throughout America and throughout the world, to finally do the right thing, tell everyone what was known, when it was known, let those survivors heal, because we all know the first step toward healing is acknowledgement and accountability. The child protection movement that we're seeing take place today throughout America is a movement that was pushed by survivors, and to the survivors who have gone to the legislature, to the survivors who have gone to law enforcement, to each survivor who has stood up and said, this happened, it was wrong, it was not my fault. Thank you for doing that. For those survivors who are still suffering in silence, you will be believed. There are people who will help you. Please talk to law enforcement. Thank you, guys. We'll be here for a little bit if anybody has any questions.
Does the San Bernardino Diocese have authority over all the priests who came into this area?
That's a great question, and the simple answer is yes. The Diocese of San Bernardino, and the bishop in particular, has full authority over any priest, any cleric who's going to function in the diocese. When one of these outside priests, say the religious orders like the Franciscans, who we spoke about earlier, when they enter the Diocese of San Francisco, they have to receive what's called faculties, which is permission from the bishop to function as a priest in this diocese. So every single priest must get the stamp of approval from the bishop before they can do anything.
And even the ones who came here for treatment, would the diocese have?
The diocese would have actual percipient knowledge of every priest who's at that facility because it's a church facility within this diocese. Now, in all candor, some of the priests who were housed at the Cherry Valley facility were probably not functioning. They were probably not functioning as priests because they were so dangerous that they had to complete treatment before even church officials would let them out there.
Okay, but this diocese would still be aware of those individuals?
Oh, certainly. And they would certainly know it because their vicar for clergy, Father Fitzgerald, operated the facility. Thank you, guys.